Hello and welcome to the 741 channel. Thank you for stopping by. Today we're going to take a look at replacing the rear brake calipers on my 2004 Chevy Tahoe. As you can see, I've got all my parts from Napa here, and I like to support my local Napa store when it comes to brakes and, well, a lot of parts for my car really, because it's a mom and pop owned shop and they always make sure that I get the right parts. So this job actually started out as replacing the front brake pads, and it's actually turned into a complete overhaul of the brake system on this thing. To make a long story short, I ended up having bad calipers in the front, and then I found the brake lines were all bad, and now I've gotten to the rear and I've actually snapped off the bleeder screws. And rather than try and fool around and get those old bleeder screws out, I'm just going to replace the calipers since everything else is new. And these may even be the original calipers on this truck, and the thing has over 200,000 miles on it, so might as well go with some new ones. So here's a look at the driver's side rotor and caliper assembly over here. So obviously I've got the wheel off and I've got the truck supported on jack stands already. So the first thing I'm going to do before I remove anything here is to go behind the caliper and remove the brake line that I actually just put on here yesterday. So here's a look at my brake line fitting. You can see it goes on this bracket and then goes into this brake hose, which wraps around and goes to the caliper over there. Because this is a new nickel copper line, this fitting is a little smaller than the original. The original used a 9/16 wrench. This one I'm going to use a 3/8 wrench on. So next up, we're taking a look under the truck here, and I'm going to remove this brake hose now. So I'm just going to remove this bolt up here using a 13mm socket. So I know you guys can't see the other side of this bolt from here, but it just goes through this bracket that holds on this trailing link. And what I've noticed is that the bolt is a self-tapping bolt, and it's kind of hard to get out of there. And just so I don't end up breaking it, I've squirted a little WD-40 on the exposed threads on this side to help kind of lubricate it as I back it out. So we're taking a look at the leading edge of the caliper, and the first thing I'm going to do is remove this bolt that holds on the brake hose. To do that, I'm going to use a 7/16 socket. Okay, I also have a drain pan under here to catch the brake fluid that's going to leak out. So next up, we're taking a look at the back of the caliper. I'm going to get ready to remove this from the truck. Now there's two ways to do this. You can remove the caliper separately from the bracket, or you can try and remove just the caliper bracket bolts themselves and leave everything together as one assembly. It looks like there's going to be a little more room to clear everything in here if I remove the caliper first. Okay, so as you can see, I'm getting ready to remove the top caliper bolt. I got a 12mm socket on my breaker bar there. Let's see if I can crack that loose. And then of course there is one more bolt down here below where the brake hose went in, right about here. And I'll loosen that one up as well. So now that those bolts are removed, I should be able to just put this screwdriver in here and sort of pry the caliper out of place. Now again, not sure if you can see it, but I kept my drain pan in there as the rest of the brake fluid leaks out. Now I should be able to pry these pads out of here. So next up, I'm going to try and remove the bolts that hold on the caliper bracket. And there's two of them. One on the top, you can see I've got my 18mm socket and breaker bar on that one already. And then there's one lower down that I'll need to break loose as well. Not sure if you guys can see it or not, but I almost got my socket and ratchet stuck. As I started loosening this bolt and it pushed everything out, I got hung up on this other bolt over here. But I think I'm okay now. I'm going to switch over to a ratchet wrench to finish this up. Now, for whatever reason, these threads are awful tight, even loosening out. So it takes a fair amount of force just to spin this thing, even though it's cracked loose. Okay, there's the bottom bolt, and the bracket is now free. And as you may have noticed, I left that inner pad in there. It was frozen and didn't want to budge when I pried on it, so I figured I could just pull this all out with it in there. Now that the bracket is removed, I should be able to just pull the rotor straight out of here. Okay, so as you can hopefully see, I've got the new hose here mounted and I'm starting to attach it to the truck. Now one thing to note is that normally I buy all of my parts from Napa, But when I ordered everything, I actually forgot to order these brake hoses. And when I went to run out to get them, Napa was closed, so I ended up stopping at the O'Reilly Auto Parts that was open instead to get these hoses. Now these should be okay, but one thing that I did notice is that they didn't include a new bolt to hold it to the truck, and they also didn't include a new bolt to mount it to the caliper, so I'll have to reuse those. But they did include new copper crush washers for this, so we should be all set there. While I'm under here, I'm going to reinstall this brake line fitting. Okay, so here's a look at the new rotor. So I'm going to spray this down with a little bit of brake clean here to remove any of the oil that they put on here to protect it during shipping. So as you can see, we're taking a look at the caliper and the pads over here. Now I'm going to try and load the pads into the caliper before I put it in the truck. So anyway, I'm starting by installing these pad slide clips. I've got the first one already clipped in here, you should be able to see. So now I'll just take this next one. It looks like they're both the same, so it doesn't matter which one goes on which side. But I'll turn this around and you can see this just sort of clips over these bosses here and fits into place. Okay, should be good to go on the clips. Now I'll try and throw the pads on. Okay, as it turns out, the pads come with its own set of clips. I'm not going to need those, I'll set those aside. Napa did include a new bolt for the brake hose with the caliper, so problem solved with that. Okay, now that these clips are installed, I'm going to install this clip into the cutout in the caliper. And this clip has a bigger tab on one end, so I'm going to flip that around and face that toward the piston side of the caliper. Okay, that should be good. Next up, I'm going to install the pads. I'm going to install these so that the wear indicators are on this side of the caliper, the side with the bleeder screw, which would be the top of the caliper. So I'll put the inner one in first. I'll just kind of set it in, and you can see these ears in the pad will engage these grooves in the clip and then kind of slide into place. Okay, and you can kind of see what that looks like there. We'll just pop that one into place. And now we'll do the same thing with the outer pad. Okay, we should be good to go. I'm going to mount this on the truck now. So I'm going to bring the caliper in, and I'm going to position it so that the pistons are facing the inside of the truck. And I'll line up the bracket holes with the threaded holes back here. Okay, so I've got that positioned. Now I'm going to bring in one of the bolts and get that started to hold everything up. Before I get too far along, I'll bring in the bottom bolt and get that one started. Now I'll just tighten this up using my 18mm socket. I recommend for these bolts that if you have a torque wrench, that you follow the manufacturer's recommendation for properly torquing these. I don't have a torque wrench handy, so I'm just going to do this by feel. So next up, let's get ready to put the brake hose on. First thing I'm going to do is remove this warning label and then pull out this protective cap. One piece of advice here, now I almost missed it, but I'm glad I saw it. A little piece of that warning label got ripped off and kind of stuck in here. Now I've got to try and fish it out. So if you're doing this yourself, pull the cap off first and then take the label out. Okay, so I've got this just snug on here now. So what I'll do now is tighten this the rest of the way and get those crush washers to crush a little bit and form a good seal here. One last thing I'm going to do before I move over to the other side is actually remove this bleeder screw, put some Never-Seez on here. And that's just so that if I have to bleed these brakes in a year or two, I can hopefully get this bleeder screw out without breaking it. And to get the bleeder screw out, I'm going to use a 10mm socket. So I'll get a little bit of Never-Seez on here, and then just put this back in the caliper for now. I will have to loosen it again, of course, when I bleed the brakes, but I'm going to put it in and tighten it up for now. That's going to wrap things up for replacing a rear brake caliper on my 2004 Chevy Tahoe. If you want more information about the parts I used in this video, you can check the description for a link to their product pages. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. And if you'd like to leave a comment or subscribe, feel free to do that as well. And if you'd like to support my channel in another way, please consider visiting my Amazon store, which you'll find linked in the description below. Thanks for watching.